Nearly ready.
Well, I was just going to wait for him to finish because that couple are going to have to leave.
No, if that's, yeah, I'll look at them at dinner. It's too rushed for me to.
See you at 5.
Bye-bye.
A lot of people want to see the PHO's presentation.
Yeah.
So 5 o'clock, some people will come back. Okay, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of Tuesday, August the 8th, 2023. And if I could, what do I want to do? Land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Syilx, and the Sinixt people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. And welcome everybody. I just want to say that for anybody that's watching or is going to stream later, we are all in attendance except for Councillor Pinero, who is of course in Colombia with the national boxing team, and so he will not be remotely joining this evening, but I'm sure that he'll be thinking about us as much as I'm thinking and hoping that he and his team have great success internationally. So item number 3, late items. Was there any late items? I did the acknowledgement.
She did.
Too busy.
It's okay, it's okay. So no late items. And if we could have adoption of the agenda as presented, please. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Page. All those in favor? And that carries. Item number 5, we have a set of previous minutes. We have council minutes of April the 11th, May 9th, June 6th, and July 11th.
Move.
Okay, those have been moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. Any errors or exceptions that need correction, Council? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. Councillor Payne, did you have any issue with the minutes?
I guess the issue, like sometimes if there's little typos or words out of alignment or anything, are we concerned about that, or, and I'm sorry that I don't have the specific one right here. Just being on a long weekend like this, it took me a while to get through them.
I think
So
it would
just help me understand better what you want me to look for and come back with.
not typos and things, but let us know, let me know so that we can fix them, obviously.
Okay,
But it's the intention of the minutes.
That's what I assumed. That was the look on my face. I apologize for not clarifying that earlier.
Okay, no, that's fine. I was thinking, okay, you're not voting, so I'm going to ask you what's going on. Okay, thank you for that. And I take it that you're not opposed to acceptance of
opposed.
the. Okay,
I
thank
understood the
you.
intent.
Item number 6, a resolution closing the meeting to the public. It is in the opinion of council that public interest requires that persons other than members of council and staff and any approved audiences be excluded from the meeting, and the meeting of council continue under section 91C of the community charter to address matters related to labor and employee relations, and under 91E for matters regarding the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of lands or improvements. If I could have someone move that resolution. Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor? And that carries.
I wasn't panicking, but you know. Sorry.
Do you have a charger? I can pull up my phone.
I don't.
Oh, you don't?
I never bring it with me. I try and charge.
Get the cables on that.
You need a box?
Yeah.
Oh, Kate's on it.
Issues for copyright to see, or for it comes in for their presentation. Yes. There's it looks like there's a cord that's not cooperating. Thank you. So we're just, Chris has gone to see if he can find a different one.
We're gonna just give 5 minutes to see if we can solve the technical issue, and then we'll just go on. So.
No, good. You're good? Yeah, good. Maybe we should have one of those after council drinks. What's that? We haven't done that.
Ever, no.
We should.
I've tried a few
gonna
times
be-
and then I just
It's
lost
gonna
it.
be gonna be short tonight, maybe.
Thanks, okay.
Maybe we should.
Maybe.
How often have we considered that?
If it's short, would you guys
If
be
it's
in?
short, totally into it.
Okay, nice.
I just have to check on the dog situation. I am now, yeah.
I feel like about 5 times or something, 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, you missed last night?
yeah.
Because I was
Midnight.
No, 11:30.
Oh, sorry. I got home at midnight.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I got home at midnight, and then I need to sit there with a glass of wine to go.
I'm all super jazzed when I get home. Like, oh my god, this is
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I don't need to sit there with a glass of wine, it's just what I do.
Did you have to do a vote? Isn't there like a, you go past a certain time?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We did.
We did, we did. We did indeedy.
It's amazing.
I don't like eating in public, but I'll just, I'm not snacking. Oh, I've been eating out of the garden. It's
Yeah.
just so amazing. You guys have a pretty
Yeah,
good
we
garden,
have
right? Yeah.
huge gardens. And it's so great because our common meals
Oh, right.
are always being like, so not only do you get these fresh ingredients, but creative use.
Yeah. And we've been trying to do that as well. Like,
It has to. This is the only way that I would do it because every time I try to run my own, everything falls. Like, Sonia and I both just can't stay on top of it.
it's taken me a long time.
Yeah.
And this is the first year I actually did a fall planting.
Oh, yeah.
Because I have half the garden space because of the laneway house in the back, so half of our lot is,
Yeah. And so this would mean you're harvesting in October?
yeah.
Yeah.
Like just just
trees.
things that I can, peas, beans, carrots, lettuce, kale, another batch of kale. So we'll see, I don't know, but I've never had that, I've had the whole garden to deal with, so I've been pretty busy just managing that, whereas now so, not that I'm not busy, I just don't sleep much. Oh, I have things, yeah, I should do that, thank you. I think
we go.
those guys are done.
There we go.
Woohoo, oh, just in time to not.
Yes. So who's running this?
Sarah's gonna run it.
I think Sarah's gonna run it. Okay. So we're going to probably,
You shook a wire somewhere.
Just pull it up and share the screen.
I don't know why. Where does the camera see us? Like, wouldn't it be easier if
What is something that references
so
our names? I'll put it that way.
Probably that one, I'm
put it that
guessing.
to do the bylaw? Public government.
So we're gonna run it, just so you know, we're gonna run it from this end. It's the best that we can do. We've uploaded your presentation. Our staff,
They'll do that.
Sarah will run the program from this end, so that at least people will have a fighting chance of seeing it that are at home or whatever. So anyways, welcome everybody. We're at item 7 of our agenda tonight, which is a workshop education session, and I would like to introduce our workshop panel for this evening. Dr. Sue Pollock, the Medical Health Officer, Jordan McAlpine, the Decriminalization Lead for Interior Health, and Karen Lehman, the Interim Director of Mental Health and Substance Use Clinical Operations. So over to the three of you for your presentation, and I believe we'll have enough time at the end to have some questions from council. So thank you.
Thank you very much. This button is not lit up, is that okay?
No, we gotta push
It-
it,
it's-
press lock.
When the lock is on, it's fine, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much to Mayor and Council for inviting us to on decriminalization and public substance use, and we are going to provide a public health perspective today. So we'll try and make a relatively brief presentation with some key points and then leave some time for questions. And I just want to just introduce myself a little bit further. So I am a medical health officer, so I'm a public health and preventive medicine physician. I'm a community medicine physician, and I am the community medicine physician for the whole of the Kootenay Boundary region. So I serve all of the members of Nelson and all the members of the public of the Kootenay Boundary area. So thank you, and we're going to pass it over to Jordan to start. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us. If you want to go to the first slide, Sarah, that would be amazing. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So just to kind of ground the conversation today as we're talking about decriminalization and kind of the intersection with public substance consumption, really wanted to ground the conversation just kind of in why we're all here. And that is, of course, due to the devastating loss that we've experienced due to the toxic drug crisis. Last year, we lost just under 2,300 individual people, people who had parents and children and jobs and families and dreams, and just really want to hold that kind of close of mind and close in our hearts as we have these conversations today. From the recent coroner's report showed that 60 to 72% of people who died due to drug toxicity in the last 6 months that they consumed by inhalation. So wanted to just kind of clarify that inhalation kind of continues to be the primary mode of consumption and the primary way that we are losing our friends and families and colleagues. So much so that now, as Lisa LaPointe reported, that drug toxicity is the leading cause of death for British Columbians between 19 and 59 years of age, which is heartbreaking. And I know that Nelson has also been greatly impacted by the toxic drug crisis. I think there's probably very few of us in British Columbia, less and less every day, who haven't been touched some way, either directly or indirectly, by the toxic drug crisis, and that we're all kind of in a state of loss and grief to one degree or another, and really want to kind of acknowledge that space as well. So thank you. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. So this is the most recent information that we're able to share in regards to Nelson specifically. So we have experienced in the first quarter confirmed 4 fatalities due to the toxic drug crisis. Of course, as I'm sure you're all aware, there have been multiple reports and media coverage around potential other losses too. 4 is what we can kind of confirm that the coroner has confirmed at this point. And kind of if we kind of continue this pace, we're looking at doubling our rate of fatalities from last year in Nelson, again, which is a very sobering fact to kind of reflect on. The other piece I wanted to kind of draw your attention to is the location piece. I think often when we're talking about decriminalization and about drug fatalities, we're often thinking about people who we kind of visibly see, people who consume substances publicly, and really important to acknowledge that population is really impacted by the toxic drug crisis, but also 50% of the people that we have lost have died in private residences as well, and really want to keep in mind that there's lots of folks that we work with every day, all the time, who use substances that we don't know about, right? And we're also losing those folks. And I think an important piece to kind of hold close as we move on. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. Yeah, so the why of the toxicity, we get asked a lot about this. Drugs are toxic because they are unpredictable and unregulated. So illicit substances that are purchased. There's no standards, there's no labeling, there's no quality control. It's really easy, especially when substances are getting more and more toxic. It's really easy for a tiny little mistake to be made somewhere along the production and trafficking line that costs people a lot of lives. So this is why decriminalization has kind of come in, is in part to address the toxic drug crisis. It's kind of one of our tools in our toolkit. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so decriminalization, I'm sure you are all familiar with it, but a quick synopsis. When we say decriminalization, we're talking about an exemption that British Columbia received from Health Canada to the Controlled Substances Act. And that exemption is specifically addressing people who use substances that are closely implicated in the toxic drug crisis. So the drugs that are most often coming up in these toxicology reports, we're looking at a variety of opioids, methamphetamine, MDMA, and crack and powder cocaine. And decriminalization makes it so that it is no longer illegal for somebody to possess up to that 2.5 cumulative grams of those substances. And as I mentioned, it's a part of kind of the wider province's approach to dealing with the toxic drug crisis and trying to make an impact. I think it's really important to acknowledge that decriminalization is a really large, significant philosophical shift for us as a society in general. One that's moving away from criminalization and embracing public health. And this approach is really different from how a lot of us were taught to think about substances and taught to think about the people who use them. It's really acknowledging and endorsing that substance use can become a health problem and that health problems require health solutions, not ones that are rooted in policing and criminalization. And this is kind of a marked kind of turn away from kind of a century-old approach that we've been taking and acknowledging that criminalization hasn't reduced the harms related with substance use. It hasn't reduced the amount of people who use substances, and it certainly hasn't helped people access care. So noting that it's really time to try something new and really embrace the public health piece of it. Next slide, please. So I'll just talk on this really quickly. This is called the paradox of prohibition. You may have seen it before. It is just a really nice visual that kind of outlines and shows us kind of how public drug policy impacts the health and social harms of an individual as well as a community. So on the left side you have it's really small for some of you, sorry. On the left side, you have kind of the social and personal harms that increase as you move up. And then along the horizontal axis, you have drug policy going from prohibition all the way to legalization. And kind of what we see is kind of on the prohibition side, you'll see there heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine, kind of noting that those are in the prohibition de facto decrim and that there's really significant social and health harms experienced in that. And similarly, if you move to the right side of the U towards the legalization with few restrictions, this is where we see tobacco and alcohol, that those are legalized, but we still actually have really significant harms associated with those substances, even though they are legalized. And so decriminalization is really a move towards the bottom kind of end of that U, towards the public health approach, market regulation, where we kind of see cannabis. And this just kind of demonstrates that we're trying to kind of bring our general approach as best as possible through all kind of levels of government and organizational structure kind of down into that public health space where we can have minimize the risks and harms as much as possible. Kind of, yeah, shows that piece of it. Yeah, so decriminalization, I know you guys had a really fulsome, thoughtful conversation around decrim and kind of the purposes of decrim and reducing stigma and how do we kind of move the needle, right, around toxic drug crisis and making it so that folks feel safe to kind of come out of hiding and access healthcare. I think the last little piece that I really just wanted to kind of highlight before we move on to this piece around public consumption is to kind of just acknowledge that public consumption of substances that really predates decriminalization and has a lot more to do with these kind of large systemic challenges that we have around poverty and the housing crisis, the high cost of living, and then of course the toxicity of the drug supply that often makes it so that folks don't have alternative places to use, and really just want to kind of highlight that decriminalization has maybe kind of shone a spotlight on some of these really significant challenges that we're all facing, not just in Nelson, but the province, globally, probably. Just to kind of really just highlight that decriminalization and public substance use are intersecting but very separate issues with their own kind of solutions. So, I will pass it on to Sue.
Great. Thanks very much, Jordan. So I mentioned that I'm a community medicine physician, so I do serve everybody, every member of the public, but I hope today that I can be here to represent those that are not here, those that we've lost and those that we are going to lose in the future to this toxic drug poisoning crisis, where we've lost far too many lives. And certainly I can appreciate and acknowledge a lot of work is happening and has happened in Nelson around providing supports and services. And so really I want to be here today to speak to those individuals who are impacted and affected by the toxic drug crisis. So the medical health officer team for Interior Health did disseminate a letter signed by all 7 of us a few months ago, stating our position on both decriminalization, but also on bylaws related to public drug use or prohibition of public drug use. And I think we're very much aligned with the provincial stance and following up on the decrim pilot that started in January. It is very much a pilot. There is going to be monitoring and evaluation underway. And, you know, as medical health officers, we do recognize that there are risks to restricting public consumption of toxic substances. And, you know, while we were seeing some improvements in the toxic drug crisis and the impacts of it prior to 2020, we had the pandemic occur, and we are seeing a worsening crisis now, and that is really multifactorial. But I think it is certainly incumbent on me to bring my perspective as a public health physician in terms of the things that we need to do as a society to protect those people who are most at risk of dying and being injured through this crisis. So some of the concerns that we bring forward today related to restricting public consumption is one that are concerned that by having bylaws in place or amended bylaws in place, that the problem of toxic drug use in public spaces will be driven, we call underground. So people, as we've already heard from Jordan, many people are using indoors in their homes, and we're seeing a huge loss of life there. We want to ensure that people who are using substances have safe places and are around other people when they're using these toxic drugs, because they very well might need somebody to help them out if they get into a situation of an overdose. So we don't want to see this problem driven any more underground than it already is. Concern that individuals will no longer have access to that life-saving support and assistance, such as naloxone from peers or those around them, or other support or outreach workers. As well, if people are experiencing adverse effects from some of these deadly combinations of drugs, there may be nobody to help them or make sure that they get that medical assistance that they need. And the drug supply has just changed so rapidly and continues to change. And so I was here a couple months ago when there was a really unusual and toxic supply of drugs circulating through the Kootenay boundary communities. And I was in Trail, and I was here, and it was really alarming. And I met with peers and some of the agencies, and it's really scary to see the impacts that toxic drug supply has. And, you know, there's only so many tools we have actually to keep people safe. And so decriminalization is meant to be one of those tools, one of many that we need to have in place. But certainly people who are using alone are at higher risk of dying and higher risk of injury. Importantly is that we need to ensure that people have alternative spaces, or spaces they can use safely around other people who can help them. We also know that restricting public consumption can affect people differently. And we know from what we've seen throughout this crisis that the toxic drug crisis affects those who are more marginalized. So those who don't have a roof over their heads, who are unhoused or underhoused, living in poverty, many people who've just caught a bad break and maybe they've lost their jobs, and maybe that's happened through the pandemic and they're in poverty. And certainly we've seen a huge impact of the toxic drug crisis on Indigenous peoples and Indigenous communities. And then we speak a lot about the stigma and the shame associated with drug use and using substances, illicit substances, and that in itself can prevent people from seeking supports. And so when we look at a bylaw such as this, would worry that even those who are using in their own homes and maybe using alone in their own homes may also see that they may also fear that they can't actually come out and seek help or go to their doctor or talk to their mom because of that sort of perpetuated stigma and shame around public drug use. So those are some of the risks that we see. And in terms of punitive approaches, so when we look at other jurisdictions or experience of others, punitive approaches are not going to change or reduce public substance use. So we need to really address the reasons that people are using substances in the first place. And we talk a lot about the social determinants of health. And as a public health physician, that starts before a baby is even born. So that actually starts in the childbearing and reproductive years and ensuring that women have access to prenatal care, and that it extends into the early childhood period, ensuring we have daycare and early childhood education, and then ensuring that people have a safe place to live. There's a steady stream of income and employment and many factors that are non-medical that affect people's health. So again, just speaking that through the provincial perspective on decriminalization, that's trying to avoid that perpetuation of shame and stigma, because this is a disorder that people have. It is a health issue. And in that regard, we need to ensure that people have access to health services. So again, forcing people to hide their substance use or use alone, and increasing that risk to them of fatal drug overdose or poisoning. And then again, can cause harm. So punitive approaches can cause those harms if there's not adequate alternative spaces, such as supervised consumption sites or overdose prevention services. And of course, we heard from Jordan as well that we're seeing a different trend across the province and extending into Nelson in terms of the mode or the mechanism of people using drugs. And it's no longer injection that is the main mechanism, it's actually inhalation. And so there's probably many reasons for that, but ensuring there's spaces where people can safely use their drugs. So we had a great meeting. We've had a great meeting with the city staff, and certainly as Interior Health, we are committed to continued collaboration to address all of these different factors and to ensure that there is a healthy and safe community for everybody, everyone who lives in Nelson, every member of this great community and beautiful community. And so we talked about the social determinants of health, and we know provincially and nationally there's a significant housing crisis and not enough housing, or difficulty getting people housed who aren't housed. And if we want people to seek treatment and supports for an opioid use disorder, we need to ensure they have a roof over their heads. And so in Interior Health, we have a couple of new positions, which are health and housing leads, and we also have community health facilitators who work with local governments, and the medical health officers for this geography, which is me. We're all committed to working closely with the municipalities and other partners to see what we can do together to ensure that people have roofs over their heads, and that'll go a long way to promote their health and well-being. And then there's also people who may have a space or a bed in one of the shelters or supportive housing, but making sure that they also have safe places when they're not in the shelter. And then speaking about the safe and appropriate places for consumption. And so as a society, people can consume alcohol, in bars and restaurants where there are certain measures in place to, help ensure that they are consuming alcohol safely, that they don't get in their car and drive home afterwards. I really don't think we should be treating illicit substances any differently. And although it is just one tool that we have in our toolbox, the availability, accessibility of an overdose prevention site and a place that is in the right location to meet the needs of everybody, that's one of the most important things we can do to save lives right now. So of course, something that we are also working on with the City of Nelson and want to continue working on. So just briefly, in terms of the province, so the provincial government is currently undertaking, I think, a fairly thorough engagement process and policy work to support proposed new legislation, which would hopefully come out in the fall, that would bring a consistent approach to regulating public substance use. So that's intended to balance the complementary goals of all of the different people and members of society, but also for public health and public safety. So balancing those things is going to be important. And so there is engagement happening, and the provincial government is asking that local governments consider pausing any new bylaws or bylaw amendments until this legislation is introduced. So one of the reasons I'm here as your medical health officer is that under the Public Health Act and the Community Charter, there is an obligation for local governments to consult with their medical health officer on bylaws and matters that can impact the health of the public. And I do think that this bylaw has that potential to impact health in that potential to increase the risks or drive people to use in underground areas or alleys and maybe use unsafely. And it is just a recommendation, so I'm not here to approve or disapprove or not approve a bylaw, but it is part of the formal consultation process, so I appreciate the invite. So my recommendation is to defer the creation of or the adoption of an amended bylaw and to wait and assess if this upcoming provincial legislation will be adequate to meet the needs of the community. And I've already touched on this a little bit, but continue to collaborate with health and with all the community agencies and partners to address the social determinants of health, to address the housing crisis, to get people who don't have a roof over their heads, to get them into some safe housing, and then to increase access to appropriate and safe places to consume substances so we can provide that life-saving health intervention. And then monitor the response and make changes. So the province will be coming out or has come out with a plan for monitoring and evaluation of decriminalization with a number of indicators that will be tracked as well. So to keep an eye, we'll be watching those as well to see what the impacts of decriminalization are on the community. And finally, if the city does decide to move ahead with the third reading and then the adoption of the amended bylaw, just would encourage you to consult with community agencies and peers with lived and living experience of substance use. So those who this bylaw will most impact. So that might be, for example, conversations around which parks and which parks would make sense and which parks don't make sense, but just to hear from those who are most impacted by this. Another consideration if the council decides to move ahead is to limit the restrictions in public substance use to areas within close proximity to those areas frequented by children. So I understand one of the concerns is children and youth observing or witnessing public substance use. So one possibility, one thing we proposed is to just limit the restrictions to areas within a certain specified distance from playgrounds, skate parks, water parks, that kind of thing. And then to avoid punitive measures and focus on redirection to support services. So have had a really positive conversation with the city, and I understand that there will not be punitive measures, and that's really great to hear. So I appreciate that that's not going to be part of amended bylaw. And that's all we have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, councillors, questions. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor, through the chair.
Sure.
Thank you. Super complex issue, obviously. I guess one of the things that's been running through my brain over this whole experience over the last, let's say, couple of months as we've been trying to grapple with this in our own town is just this sense of sort of what about the rest of us, I guess, is what I'm saying. It's not, I wasn't looking for that, but I feel this is quite a small portion of our population, and the job of council here is to looking out for all of the people who live in this town. So and the couple of words that have been running through my head is bare minimum safety protocols. I mean, we do that all the time, and I know this is a crisis situation, but as a counselor, one of my responsibilities is to make sure that there's the bare minimum, and really, they're maybe not just the bare minimum, but actually like solid safety protocols for our community, for everyone. So I guess I'm asking you, the three of you, what about that issue of the rest of us, and that we can walk around our town and feel safe, our kids can run around at a park and not have to worry about a needle or a shattered pipe or a bag of fentanyl on the ground. So I guess I'm asking you that question in your opinion.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we recognize this is a very it's a complex and wicked problem, and as you've acknowledged as well. we are currently in a public health emergency. So we were in a public health emergency, had been for COVID as well, for the pandemic. And, we are losing people, we are losing community members in ways that are preventable. These are, in my mind, preventable deaths of many people, right? And we've heard thousands of people that have died and died needlessly from this toxic drug crisis. So, I hear your point about, the community members, all the community members that are affected and wanting to take your children to a park and have them not step on a, pipe or a needle. Absolutely. But I do want to be that, as I said, try and be that voice for those who maybe aren't being heard. And we have individuals out there, we have individuals in the communities, in our communities, who are facing a very significant health crisis and health issues. And so, my job is to try and be the voice and try and advocate for them. And again, see this as a health issue, right? Not as a criminal issue, but as a health issue. Jordan, do you want to add anything?
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I've got Councillor Lockenberg, and then I've got Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Mayor. I think there may be some misunderstanding in terms of where we're coming from. And it makes sense. Like you said, it's a complex issue. Like your presentation, I think, is pretty much sort of baseline understanding of a lot of us in terms of as we wrestle through this crisis. What we're looking at here is trying to navigate sort of an emerging social contract with illicit drug use that might eventually become just legal drug use, especially through what is, as you acknowledge, is a kind of an experimental pilot stage where we're trying to understand the dimensions of it, what will have an effect in terms of certainly reducing deaths, but also kind of get to a place where we're managing the overall sort of net health of people, including both users, but also including affected community members as well. And so I'm trying to understand, and your presentation actually helped me understand where some of the misunderstanding about what we're trying to do here lies. So the bylaw, as I see it, is not about punitive. It's really about making explicit this social contract, which we kind of do all the time. Whether it be zoning or whatever. When you say an R1 zone, you're not punishing people that are attempting to develop a house that's not R1 zone. You're just communicating this is where we want this kind of housing in this area. Just in the same way when we define parks or playgrounds, we say this is an area for kids, or this is a school and this is where kids learn. All of that is about designing or making clear to everybody where and how we live in our community. And I think by seeing this as something other than that, it actually starts to perpetuate the stigma, or continues to perpetuate the stigmatization of public drug use. Because, and if you don't say where something is not appropriate, then it's not clear. Saying you can't do drugs in this area is in some sense saying also it's okay to do drugs in this area. It's both. It's not just saying no, it's also giving an implicit permission about yes, where you can. And so I think some of the misunderstanding comes from this sort of reaction to decriminalization itself. So when a council, and I know Nelson's not the only one, are trying to wrestle through where it's appropriate and how to manage something that we didn't initiate, we're just trying to help the community navigate. What we're getting into is anything that we might do is seen as a reaction, is seen as reactionary in some cases, when it's really about trying to make this work. For example, the complaints that we're hearing from the public are at a level that I've never seen before, and coming from people that were initially or originally supportive of decriminalization. In fact, stigmatization is increasing. So if you're looking, or at least from our experience, and in terms of the pilot, that's part of what needs to go into the pilot, the study. What does stigmatization mean? How do you measure it? And is it increasing or decreasing? Because maybe in the short term, you might have more public and open drug use, But if the reaction to that open-end drug use is harsh from the community, then that itself is going to drive drug use back underground. So unless do you understand what I'm saying in terms of getting that social contract essentially clarified? So I guess the questions I have for you is, can you understand what local governments or the City of Nelson is trying to do with this bylaw beyond just trying to criminalize drug use, but in fact maybe doing something about navigating it so that it ultimately will work?
You want to take that one? Okay. Yeah, I think it's really important to understand, and maybe I don't understand, but understand what is the problem that is trying to be solved here by a bylaw. So I think that's important, and that would be a question I have. So I'll put that out there. And I think, and Jordan did speak to the fact that public drug use predates decriminalization, and we don't actually have evidence yet or information that more people are using drugs as a result of decriminalization. Now, it might be a little bit more visible. Maybe that's because people feel a little bit safer to use out in the open, which is actually a good thing if they can then get life-saving health interventions. So I guess that would be my one point, my one question would be sort of what's trying to be solved by the bylaw. And then second, I would say that if there are going to be restrictions put in place in terms of where people can use, and that again, there needs to be alternatives, and those need to be available and in locations that people will access, right? So, for example, in inhalation, OPS. So those are my 2 points. Do you want to add anything, Jordan?
I think maybe we talked about this with the city earlier today, had a really great conversation with your staff about this, but my mind just keeps going back to the folks who we don't see using substances all the time. It goes to, the folks who are working construction jobs and who are working in grocery stores, and just our colleagues and our friends who have never felt safe to disclose their use. And I guess when I think about this bylaw, I really do understand kind of where you guys are coming from, and your city staff are really helpful in helping kind of suss out the intentions and kind of the nuances of the work. But I'm just worried about the folks who are already too scared to identify themselves, and does this bylaw express to them that they're loved and valuable, and that we care about them, and that we want them to be as open as they can with us so that we can give them whatever supports that they need. I think that it does a really good job of kind of showing that you're considering everybody's use of space and feeling safe in the space, and and I'm just concerned about what the overarching message might be to somebody who maybe doesn't necessarily identify themselves publicly, but sees themselves as people who aren't maybe being cared for in the way they would need to, if that makes sense. I just keep thinking about those folks who we don't know about.
Follow up at this time? Or-
I do, but I know we're short on time, so I'll hold it until.
Yep, sure. So we'll have Councillor Tate, and then I have Councillor Page.
I have a couple, I usually just have easy yes/no questions. I think you just said we don't have any numerical evidence yet whether decriminalization is actually causing more public use. I don't know how you would have counted it before and how you could count it later, so I don't know what the benchmark for that is. Do we have any evidence that decriminalization has reduced deaths in the way that you're hoping with being able to access Narcan on the street? Because that's an easy yes/no. Are we having fewer deaths than previous to decriminalization?
That's a great question, and unfortunately, it is not a yes or no answer. I think it's really important to kind of clarify that overdose deaths are due to the toxicity of the unregulated drug market, and decriminalization is really about removing the criminal penalties and stigma from folks, but decriminalization in and of itself doesn't actually address the toxicity of drugs. So we're going to continue to experience overdose deaths as drug toxicity increases, and unfortunately, the supply continues, as Sue mentioned too recently, get harder. So a challenging thing to measure, especially this early, like we're only 6 months into decriminalization, but when we're looking at the drug toxicity piece of it, I think we have to kind of shift the conversation more to like alternative prescribed and non-medical supply and overdose prevention sites and inhalation, like looking at that piece more decriminalization is looking more at the stigma and the criminal consequences piece, which will eventually lead us down that road, but it's just a piece of kind of this whole big puzzle. So,
Okay.
so it's unfortunately, I wish it was a yes, a yes or a no answer, but it's a little bit more nuanced.
So, Nelson is a really caring community. I don't know if you know us well, but you're getting to know our staff and our people well. I went to speak with some of our really vulnerable, unhoused folks. I've been a number of times over the past week for a number of hours and spent some time with the folks. And they describe themselves as daily drug users, and they describe themselves as folks with substance abuse disorder. And I think it's important not to paint everyone with the same brush. And I know that we've heard that from some of the people that came to speak at the Cow, that there are folks who are causing disruption in our parks, and it's not necessarily maybe the folks that I spoke to. What the people that are quite visibly unhoused in our community right now asked me, told me what they want, which is dignity, privacy, and healthcare. So I don't understand how hanging Narcan kits on bushes is how we're accessing healthcare. And we're in this huge crisis, and does that not give us access to like just make it happen, like build the places, get the complex care, get it going, find the space. Like we're all talking about the appropriate location, but like, if this is a crisis, we need to put the money into it quickly and now, and so we don't lose the folks who are starting to get rough around the edges because they're frustrated and they're feeling the disruption. So I would advocate for the people that I met over the last week that were kind enough to spend time with me. And I would also mention that that not everyone can be painted with the same brush. So I think that if we can have a way to educate all of our important community members on which spaces are appropriate for which activities, that this amendment hopefully will give us the way to have those conversations. And also, we need the other stuff. Like we need dignity and privacy. The folks, like the language that one user said to me, and she's such a nice young woman, she said, I wrote it down, I don't want my struggles to be normalized or on display for children. We need spaces. We need appropriate locations. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing.
Councillor Page.
Well, after Councillor Tate, it might sound a bit redundant. My question was around the implementation and planning of the support services, both in the city of Nelson and within our other partner cities, and how that will be communicated to local government at both at municipal but also regional district level, so we get a clear sense of where our investments are going to be going, or potential future investments will be going from our hospital taxes and elsewhere to implement the kinds of spaces both for support service delivery as well as inhalation and harm reduction. How are we going to get to a clear plan in this regional context of where these services are going to be set up, and get to a place where we're executing on a plan that is transparent and has met all of our public consultation goals, and also had that opportunity for us to peer review with our neighbors and understand that we're all moving in the same direction. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's my question. We're a long question group. At least it's a question, not just a
Well, first, I want to say thank you for that opportunity, or this opportunity. So I do understand from the staff here that when we met earlier today, that there is conversation happening within, the city of Nelson here, Interior Health, and our community partners in terms of moving forward and addressing some appropriate long-term and short-term goals around inhalation and injection sites. We have robust injection services available in Nelson. I can speak to a little bit around trail. We have a working group as well that's quite robust, involving the health authority. Trail counselor, I believe, has been invited. I'm not sure if they're attending
as well as community partners in terms of moving forward with addressing some of the same challenges that Trail is experiencing as Nelson is experiencing. So we're just in the early stages of that. We've really met twice, and that's it. But the same sort of process around working with our partners to identify those short-term, medium-term, temporary, and permanent sites. It's a very layered and complex process, as we've all kind of spoken to, I think, in this. So that work has started, and the work here in Nelson has continued on with the support of your staff and your mayor, with the health authority, to move forward on some of these more difficult questions to address. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Keith?
Supplemental? I think some of the challenge is getting to a place where there's a plan that can be referenced and brought through the public process. That maybe you could speak to those mechanisms that are maybe already in motion or will be on the work plan into the future.
Yeah.
As like, because I
for
think
sure.
people don't have something they can reference, say, we know where we're going.
We don't know where we're going yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we don't know where we're going yet. But what we do know is that that includes city council, the staff, community members, and involves a robust consultation process. That we do know. And I know that that's going to look different for each community and with each city council. And so we don't have a script or a pre-written template about what that's going to look like here or in Trail at Castlegar. That's going to be developed with the support of your staff here and your leadership here.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Payne.
I'd just like to pursue one of the points on the slide, and that was the fact that the province is working, my understanding, at breakneck speed, which for the provincial government, not sure what that is, but it's a extreme priority for them to bring forward legislation as soon as they sit in the fall. I'm presuming that you are consulting in some way and involved in that process. Do you, my question, I guess, is the move that we're making here that may have serious repercussions, both in life, lives lost, as well as reinforcing that stigma and setting people back who have just started with decriminalization to feel that there may be a path for them towards wellness and acceptance and the dignity that Councillor Tate has spoken about. Is there anything that this is going to achieve that legislation won't cover? And I know we don't know what the legislation is, but how quickly do we need to accelerate this program to do that? Is there a benefit as opposed to having this as being a temporary measure that may well be a setback to our community when legislation is coming from a different body with a farther reach than what we could do here in a collaborative way?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Payne, for that question. And yes, so we are being consulted on the provincial legislation. So I know that our team of medical health officers has been asked and provided input, and I understand that there is broad engagement happening as well with local governments and other partners as well in terms of what should be encompassed in that policy or legislation. So that remains our recommendation to, as medical health officers for Interior Health, that our municipal partners or local governments do wait for that provincial legislation that will provide a consistent standard approach to public consumption of substances, and that is our recommendation.
Councillor Lockmore, Councillor Tate.
I'll try to be quick on this one. The forthcoming legislation from the province, it seems to me, would greatly benefit from more examples of municipalities trying different approaches to communicating and establishing social norms and public norms. Taking a broad brush approach when, as you've admitted, in a context where there's so little actual information about what's working and what's not working, seems to me a smart approach to save lives. What we do here today might actually help inform what that legislation would look like in the fall, if it does come in the fall. And further to that, I just want to stress again and maybe get your take on this. We've spoken a lot about stigmatization and helping people. The point of stigmatization, from my understanding, or destigmatization, is so that when people are using, they're doing it somewhere in public where if they have a reaction, an overdose, that they're there, somebody's there to catch them and to provide quick support if they need it. What I'm struggling with is, given the level of stigmatization that we're seeing today, do you, and is it part of your experiment to try to measure that? Because if that's really what we're talking about, we're trying to find ways to destigmatize so that when people are using it, they're using it in a way that if they overdose, there's someone there to support them. That is the use or the animosity that's being created, the social stigma that's being fostered and fermented currently, is that being considered and measured so that we can ultimately try to get to a place where, as a community, the temperature is lowered, we have these social norms adopted that everybody sees and agrees with, so that people feel like there's a place for them to come out and use, as opposed to coming out and using and then getting yelled at by somebody in the public. So I guess my question does come back to, how much is actual stigmatization being measured and considered in this pilot?
My understanding is that as a part of the provincial framework that they are measuring the impact of stigma and rates of. I believe that's a part of the dashboard that they're releasing in the next couple of months that should be publicly accessible. That's my understanding. I haven't seen it yet personally, so don't hold me to that.
You're on YouTube.
Oh, right. You're right. Everybody can hold me to it. I did want to specify, and I don't know if you meant this, but like destigmatization. Ooh, that word is hard at this time of day. Isn't necessarily just about people feeling safe that they can come out and use substances publicly. Although I certainly think that if your options are to use outside and have someone rescue you if you need it versus being alone, I certainly would support a safety-based decision like that. But I think the piece around stigma is much bigger. Like I think when we talk about the impact of stigma and what it would look like to not have that, I think like I'm really thinking again about the folks who sit in their doctor's office and the doctor says, hey, anything else? And they think, ooh, I really need to talk about this thing that's really a health challenge for me, but I'm scared of what will happen if I do. Will they tell my employer about it? Will they report me to the authorities? Will all of these like big questions, and I think it's that kind of overarching piece of stigma that really it's bigger than just coming outside and using somewhere where you can be seen and responded to if you need it. It's more about feeling like you have the dignity and the respect of the people around you who care about you to be able to ask for what you need when and if you ever need it. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to kind of clarify that because I just think it's the goal of decrim isn't that people will come out and use in parks, right? The goal of decrim is really that people feel like they can articulate what their experience is and what their relationship is with the substances they use, and if they feel like they need some support in changing that relationship, that nothing holds them back. Not fear of criminal penalties, not fear of losing their job or being judged by their parents or their loved ones. I think that's really what we're looking to see, and that's not something that's going to change in 6 months. Like that's something that's going to, like, we're into this for the long haul to kind of rewrite that relationship that we have with substances and rewrite the relationship that we have with the people who use them. And yeah, I think it's a big picture piece. So
Can I just remind you to either turn your mics on or speak right into them, because everyone that's away from home.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You
Hopefully they didn't hear the part about me being on YouTube. Thank you. Thanks for that question, though.
Councillor Tate, I am mindful of the time, but
We're good. I was on the same page there. Thank you.
okay. Councillors, any other questions? I just had a more overview question of my own, and that is in your slide presentation, talking about the collaboration to address public use. And I just want to say, for better or worse, I truly believe, and I guess my pride shows through even as, on any topic, that I think Nelson has been far ahead of the curve compared to many communities for many years now in trying to address the issues around drug use, the toxic drug program. I mean, back in 2017, we started the Street Outreach Collaborative, which has been very successful, has been modeled, became the community action team, sort of spun out of that. It's always had the support of police. It's always had support of our staff. I know you had a very positive discussions this afternoon with our staff. I feel that oftentimes these things are better left unpoliticized. I made that comment this morning in the Nelson Fentanyl Task Force meeting that I attend every month, because I think it's important that as a politician, I'm there listening. I'm not there to solve the problem. But I think our staff are in a position to have relayed our thoughts about taking what I consider a made in Nelson approach to looking at a potential bylaw in advance of the provincial government meeting in September, and then whenever they manage to get around the legislation for it to come out. And in that time period, as Councillor Lockenberg said, that perhaps it would be an example that further informs the process. I do have a concern that the provincial government might come up with regulations that are far more stringent than what we're looking at, which will then put us in a position where we're having to do something that we actually haven't wanted to do here in the city of Nelson. There are two sides. Actually, there's three sides to every coin that I know about. But my question is, because you kept going back to this, if you're going to restrict where they are, then they have to have a place to go. Now, I realize the big issue here in Nelson that keeps coming back is the lack of an inhalation site. But I would like to know, and just so that everybody understands, in terms of what within KB, because you guys, Dr. Pollack, you represent this area, could you tell us where there's a supervised consumption site anywhere in the Kootenay boundary? And two, if you would just remind us where the OPS sites are, because my understanding for Kootenay boundary is Nelson actually has the only two OPS sites. Mind you, they are for injection. They are not for inhalation. But could you just remind me, because I'm trying to keep up to date with where all of these spots are, but where are these services for alternate places for people to use safely?
Maybe I'll turn to Karen for that one. Thanks.
The supervised consumption site is a site that is specific to the federal legislation. There is currently no supervised injection site in the Kootenay boundary.
Consumption site, so I just want to correct your language on that.
Supervised injection sites.
Okay.
Yeah, that was.
So for consumption, for safe consumption.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Outside of Nelson?
There's a difference between supervised, I just want to get this clarity between supervised consumption site and the OPS.
Supervised injection sites, that is a federally regulated healthcare service. And there is not a supervised injection site in the Kootenay boundary. In Nelson, there are two sites. One is at the hub and one is at Anchors. And between those two sites, they are able to provide 7-day-a-week injection OPS services. So OPS is the provincial legislation that was brought in at the beginning of the toxic drug supply crisis 7 years ago. And between those two sites, they're able to provide I think it's about between 5 and 6 hours, or 5 and 8 hours of service, or 7 hours of service, 7 days a week. The hours do vary just because we're all experiencing staffing challenges, but they do a very good job of coordinating that service. Currently, in the rest of the Kootenay boundary, there is no other observed consumption site, inhalation or injection. There is EOPS, which is Episodic Overdose Prevention Services. That's right, which are mobile. And here in Nelson is provided by redone. And Trail also has some minimal OPS service, EOPS services provided by redone members, and also some of the an ad hoc group kind of started with a nurse practitioner and a nursing instructor in Selkirk who did some outreach during the recent events around the toxic drug supply in Trail.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. Any further questions, councillors? Okay. I really want to thank you, and I want to thank you also for coming in and doing this public presentation. A couple things. I do want to invite you back again at some point, because I know that there's probably other public health issues that we need to address that you're also responsible for, and so that would be good to have a discussion on that at some point as well. And we did build these new agendas for this council to have the ability to have these workshops and open dialogue where we can ask questions and have some back and forth, and so I think they're very important. I also want to thank you for taking time today to meet with staff to get a full understanding of what we're doing on the ground here in Nelson in terms of working around the issues of decriminalization, the issues of toxic drugs, which are it's just mind-boggling. I don't even know how to explain it. And no one should die. I mean, there's not a counselor or myself or any of our staff that want to see people dying as a result of this, of the toxic drugs that are on the street. I think taking a healthcare approach is a good approach, but I think that we've also got some good plans here to also move ahead on. It's just not lost on me, and no one should die. This isn't a criminal activity. I mean, this is a healthcare emergency. It's not a criminal activity. So I think we all feel for families and people that have had loss. I mean, we're a small community, and it has touched all of us in our community. So once again, I really want to thank you for your time. And for those who are in the audience or who are listening, we will be back at 7 after our recess. I invite you all to come back. The first item up will be discussion around the third reading of the bylaw. I just want to make clear that it's third reading. It's not final reading of this bylaw, but third reading will start at 7, or barring any technical difficulties, maybe 7:05. But anyways, we'll be back then. So I'd like to ask council for a motion to recess at this point. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Page. All those in favor of recess? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very
That
much.
passes.
Thank you.
Well, they get it from their parents.
So, welcome back to the continuation of the Tuesday, August 8th City Council meeting. And we're at item number 11, requests. I don't believe there are any. And then delegations, we have no delegations tonight. And it brings us then to item 13, bylaws. So I'll just read the summary analysis. Staff are presenting Parks Amendment Public Nuisance Bylaw number 3577 to Council for third reading. The purpose of the bylaw amendment is for the protection and enhancement of the well-being of the community by prohibiting the public consumption of controlled substances in city parks. At the July 28th special meeting, Council requested a 10-meter radius around the Scout Hall be included in the amending bylaw. Staff included Chatham Street Park as a playground in the heart of this park. Amendments have been made to Parks Amendment Bylaw Public Nuisance number 3577, 2023 to include these parks. Council also requested that ticketing not be used as an available enforcement tool. Staff have reviewed Parks Bylaw number 3330, 2016, and Bylaw Notice Enforcement Bylaw number 3195, 2011, and confirmed that there is no mechanism for ticketing for contravening the new section 3.11. Therefore, bylaw and police would rely on education as the means of enforcement and not ticketing. Council is requesting to give third reading as amended to Parks Amendment Bylaw Public Nuisance number 3577, 2023. We have a comprehensive backgrounder there. We have a list of the parks, which does not include all of the parks in Nelson. These are selected parks based on review by fire and emergency services and police and city staff. We've heard earlier this evening from the Sue Pollock, Dr. Sue Pollock, the medical health officer, and her team from Interior Health. And we have, if I find the right page, recommendations. So if somebody wanted to move it.
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay,
I'll second.
and can I have a seconder? It's been seconded, so it's been moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. And if you could read the recommendation, Councillor Tate.
That council passes the following resolution, that Parks Amendment Public Nuisance Bylaw number 3577, 2023 be read a third time as amended.
Okay, as the mover, Councillor Tate, do you want to speak to it, or should we just open it to the floor?
Yeah, I'll speak to it. I mean, as a local government, much of what we do is taking care of the basic day-to-day needs, spaces, facilities for our residents and community members. And we had a pretty good discussion just an hour ago. What we're talking about here is preserving safe spaces for kids, and that this provides us maintaining specific spaces for children. We don't want anyone picking up a needle or a broken pipe in a playground area. And we're a caring community. We care about our kids. We care about all the residents of the community. And so I would vote in favor of this.
Thank you. Councillor Lockenberg.
So I also support this resolution, this bylaw amendment. So the majority of users do want to avoid drug use around children. In fact, they have internally amongst their community certain rules and norms of behavior. So it's not, the issue isn't the majority of drug users, it's the minority that end up painting an unfair picture on everybody. I too had a series of personal outreaches where I spent time with members of the community, multiple days, many hours. And interestingly, the response when I asked them, what do you think of this bylaw, was unanimous in support. Surprising. In fact, in some cases, it was a no-brainer. And the reasons for this support, as I was told, made a lot of sense. It offers clarity in moments of vulnerability. So when you're using, you're not necessarily at your best moments of judgment. And so having that clarity is really helpful. Also, the problems that we're seeing in the community are often being created by the minority, many of them not from Nelson. In fact, I was told sometimes they're called weekend warriors, coming into town, not knowing the norms of behavior within the community, and engaging in bad behavior. And so the community is concerned, as I've been told, that they're being painted with the same brush as even the bad actors. The purpose of this bylaw is not about exclusion. It's about fostering understanding and social harmony. And I think we need to, as a council in a city, we definitely need to engage better with the community. And I think this has given us an opportunity to do that, as well as recognize that the goals of decriminalization are not being met currently with the status quo. I think I'm seeing backlash, and I've heard a pretty, disturbing set of stories about the community's increasingly angry response, targeting people that weren't necessarily the cause of the problem in the first place. One example was down at Government Road, in the encampment down at Government Road. There's somebody or multiple people were throwing, large gauge fireworks into that community and then taking off. And that's new behavior, according as I've been told. And so I think this bylaw gets us some clarity where needed. It allows the community to, and again, this is stuff that I was told, engage in self-policing better, so that if somebody new is in town, they can say, no, we don't use in front of children. We don't use in these areas, and it's all quite clear. And so I think going forward, this will help meet the goals of decriminalization. It's definitely better for our community. And on top of that, I, however, do agree that all of us need to do more to find a path forward. Excuse me. That's it. Thanks.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Councilor Wattenberg, for that. So I think just for me on a very personal level, I feel like this is just the bare minimum that that under the conditions that we find ourselves in as a council, considering the fentanyl emergency that's been declared by the province. So it's not like we have a whole lot of tools, but I feel like what we've done here through a lot of work and interaction with community groups and health providers is to just lay out the bare minimum I said here for the whole community safety for all citizens. So I really feel like this is quite targeted, quite explicit about where you can and can't do illicit drugs, and I always think back, like, you can't go down to Lakeside and drink a beer, you can't smoke a cigarette near the playground. I mean, there are already lots of rules near playgrounds and schools, and so I feel like this does tackle a lot of those pieces, and when and if the federal or the provincial government comes with new legislation, then maybe we'll have to revisit this. And as you said, Mayor, maybe what they're going to do might be way more than this. We don't know. But I think this is a great start, so I'm in favor of this. Thank you.
Councillor Page.
Okay, I'll give my kick at the can here. I would vote in opposition to this at this time. I'm in the stance of the deferral and waiting to see what the province will bring forward. And the reasons for that is I still don't see where we have figured out the safe consumption site component of this. We are in the position of saying that we don't want to have a particular activity existing within particular locations of public space in our community, and yet we also still don't have an active safe inhalation site available in the community to refer people to. And so I think in that sense, this is an action, but it's not an action that's part of a comprehensive response. I think what we need to ensure that as much as we are starting a conversation here on what the city's role in coordinating and organizing the response to the ongoing crisis, which will not dissipate after this bylaw does or does not pass, is that that conversation needs to be carried on between us as council and with leadership team at staff's level on how we are facilitating a response locally to the ongoing crisis that has been going on for 7 years and only getting worse, and how we position ourselves to ensure that the people within this community that are in many ways self-medicating and dealing with the kinds of lived experiences that have led them down this path are in some ways the least able to coordinate, figure out how to work themselves out of that. And so if we don't have sufficient housing, if we don't have sufficient areas to deliver services, if we're not capable as a community at making sure that not only are there understandings of what needs to be done, but opportunities for people with the least amount of bandwidth to access those services and to be able to improve upon their lived experience now, I think this particular action doesn't address those larger issues that are really underneath of what we're seeing. We're seeing the presentation of a manifestation of a larger drug issue, and nothing that we do here to move people along in addresses the healing that needs to happen within that community. And within those individuals, whether they be people experiencing homelessness, or working professionals that don't self-identify and don't seek treatment, or people from out of town coming to Nelson, as they always do, to recreate and experience the Kootenays. So I am really much more of the mind that a deferral is what's most appropriate here, and seeing what the province does is most appropriate here, and figuring out what our larger response is as a community and as a city, and then making choices on our strategy and what our plan will be. And maybe this is one of those tactics that comes out of that. But right now I feel we're at a tactic and we don't have a coordinated, comprehensive plan to be part of the solution for the overall emergency. So at this time, I'm in opposition.
Yep, you're
Is it my
last.
turn? It's my
Councillor
turn.
Payne.
Okay. I was really struck today when the health officer asked the question, what's the challenge that we're trying to solve with this bylaw? And that led me down thinking, how do I feel that this bylaw may resolve that challenge? And I couldn't see that path. I think without alternatives to provide when we're saying not here. So if you're walking down the street with your beer and the police officer said to you, not here, he can divert you to a safe consumption site of alcohol. We don't seem to have that mechanism here. I also think I don't know that we're using our resources wisely in this. We're taking a lot of time involving a lot of people and places when deferring based on the counsel of our health authority and counsel from our provincial representative, our MLA, who have both asked that we don't pass this legislation at this time until we see what the province is bringing forth. And even if we go through third reading tonight, we still don't come back until September to pass the bylaw. I'm correct in that?
Not necessarily. Council can
Oh, so
have
we
a special meeting and pass this anytime they want.
Okay.
So I think that's the intent.
Oh, the intent is to
Yeah.
have a special meeting if it goes through third
Correct.
to pass this sooner than that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was not something I understood. So and the only other comment that I want to make is Councillor Tate spoke so eloquently about reaching out, and obviously the rest of us have all done our level of trying to connect with the community most affected by this. And I would have to say that saying that we're aiming to provide a level of dignity and safety for that community by passing a nuisance bylaw just feels like it's just insulting. That's my personal opinion. I cannot, in good faith, without having consulted directly with this community support this bylaw? And maybe staff has gone out and connected more directly with the community, but none of the organizations that I'm a part of. And I am overwhelmingly surprised that the individuals that Councillor Lochtenberg spoke to were unanimously in favor, because the groups and individuals that I was speaking to were unanimously opposed.
Can I just speak to what?
I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna just, so we get an update from staff as to what's going on. So, as I mentioned in today's meeting that you attended today at the Fentanyl Task Force, I'm just gonna ask Chris Johnson to update some of the activities that the city's been doing. Great.
Thank you. Through the chair, perhaps to speak directly to the engagement piece. For the last little while, when in looking at, really trying to get an inhalation OPS site selected and identified, and going through that process, and as well working on different sort of phases of the encampments and what people, sort of how we're working with the community in those situations. Our direct relationship has been with the community outreach team that works in Nelson and works directly with this community, specifically as I understand it, the majority of the unhoused folks. So that's our sort of my direct consultation route is to discuss with them around, what works, what doesn't, how can we support the community while still, trying to find a bit of a balance. So as an example, we've talked a lot about what is occurring with the encampments out at Government Road, the one on Edgewood Lane. And I also had the opportunity to speak to them about the idea of this bylaw and, talk to them about it, show them the list of the parks that were included. And they were very much in favor. Obviously that's not talking directly with the individuals, that are, experiencing homelessness, that are of this community. Rather, sort of their closest sort of ally and partner in all of this, as I can understand it. And, their comments were very much supportive of it, in terms of, for one, that there's not a lot of drug use outside of sort of the areas that we know as it stands, according to them. They said primarily the folks that they're dealing with are around the downtown core. And if anything, this will in the future kind of keep the group in an area that's a little bit easier for them to provide the services, for the street outreach team to be around them and provide the services, because again, they are a small team, and maybe that's something, another conversation, but they're a small team of 3 that is providing a service or providing many services throughout the week. And for them to not have to be ranging further, they actually saw that as a positive. So as far as engagement on this and with many things, they're one of my main partners. Also been working with anchors and IH to identify the inhalation OPS sites or potential sites for that, including a temporary site. So understanding that a permanent site will likely take longer and that we need to find a solution sooner than longer. So discussing possible locations for a temporary inhalation OPS site, where they can use their episodic OPS rig, that they can kind of park it and be in one place. And that way the community will know where they are during set hours as well. It would provide a lot of safety in discussing with anchors. There was, getting to be more concerned that the episodic OPS was going into, sort of more places where safety became a larger concern. So if we could find a place that was secure and we were able to sort of improve the area that they could temporarily use while we looked for, what would ideally be that indoor inhalation OPS site. So as far as outreach, that's we're really trying to work with the service providers in town, and understanding that they've been working for years to build these relationships with the folks. and really trying to leverage that. So that's been the approach thus far from my part of it. And I'll turn it over to Kevin to add some more.
Yeah. Sorry. Just in addition to that, as the mayor alluded to, we met with the deputy minister and one of the ADMs for mental health and addictions, and they explained sort of what we're trying to do, how we're trying to find balance here, how we're working with our vulnerable population, whether it's encampments, the public drug use, and safe injection or inhalation sites. And certainly I felt they felt our approach is a good balanced approach. I think they recognize Nelson is a progressive community, that that we are working with our social sector and our business community and citizens on trying to find a good solution. They were, I think, quite supportive that we weren't, looking at banning this in all our parks. I just think in the downtown here, we have right here in front of City Hall, we have IOD Park, we have Hendrick Street Park. So I think they were, they felt we were taking quite a balanced approach. Certainly the comment from the deputy minister was that, it's not the provincial government's intention to get in front of local governments. They believe this is a local government decision, and they want us to make sure we have that public health lens on this. And so I, certainly after that conversation, I certainly got the strong impression that they felt we were taking a good balanced approach. And I think they also recognize, as Councillor Lautenberg stated, that there has to be balance. Otherwise, if you don't have that, then you get that other community pushback, which could be detrimental to trying to move the needle forward on an ongoing basis. So. And then we did meet with the public health officer and the other two presenters here as well. I guess maybe I'll just add with the mental health, we certainly pushed on, the services that Councillor Page brought up, that, we're 100% with you, that, the services aren't there, they need to be there. And that is missing in the plan. You heard tonight, we pushed again. What is the plan for our region? Do you have a strategic plan? How are you implementing OPS sites? How are you implementing, the recovery services? And they're scrambling. They're not there yet. And, but I think they heard, and I know they're hearing from Mayor and Council. I'm sure they're hearing at the UBCM level that that's the missing link, and it is a health response. And local governments cannot be the lead in this health response. We can certainly be partners and support that, but we need health to do the health part of this. They talk about the concerns in people's homes, and addiction is about isolation. It's not about being able to use in the park. I have experience with addiction in my family, and the last thing you want to do is make this public. And it's not about the stigma about it. It's the addiction. The addict does not want you to be connected, because the addict is powerful when you're isolated, and so that's a whole different response than just seeing it being used in public. In my experience with addiction, I'm nowhere near a medical professional, but a personal experience it's a much bigger issue than seeing it used normally. Alcoholics are alcoholics. They can't have another drink. Suggesting an alcoholic go to a bar is not a good response, right? It's the last thing an alcoholic needs. and their challenges, there's alcohol all around them, and they're struggle with they're at, it's over socialized that that they struggle with. So there's a lot more to this, but at this stage, certainly what I heard from both the public health officer, what I heard from the deputy minister, that they want to see communities take good balanced approach and certainly not criminalize it, not penalize people for health issues that they have, and we are, I think, working really hard trying to find solutions. They're not solutions we're going to find overnight. These are complex, and we're not medical professionals. We're just trying to work with those in our community that are doing everything they can. And the last thing I'll just add, Chris mentioned, how stretched our street outreach workers. Our fire is just as stretched. I think you have the stats in your package. I think I was meeting with the chief one day, and I think there was 3 or 4 calls in an hour that I was in his office, and that's tragic. But the reality is, again, if we spread this further, it just further stretches our resources. The stats showed that I think one of those 196 ODs were outside of or in a park. There was 10%, I think, in people's homes, and the other 170-ish were all in the downtown, and that that gives our folks a chance to respond in an effective manner. So I think there are, and I think that was confirmed by street outreach that this is where they are, and in fact some of the OPS locations we suggested, the response was that's too far, they won't go that far. So so that's telling me that the service needs is to be in the downtown, and we're finding balance for both parties. I think that does create that conclusion, and that's, like I said, that's what I heard from both the parties that we talked to.
Councilor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. In your discussions with the provincial government representatives, do you feel like they understand how our local emergency services are being stretched thin, and do they get that? Because I feels like that's kind of this hidden cost that the municipalities are having to struggle with throughout our province, across Canada, I would imagine. So do they understand that?
I think, again, they, I saw them taking lots of notes and saying, thanking us for the perspective and understanding they were getting from us. So, yeah, I don't think they understand it at that micro level of what the impact on these type of policies have on the ground, and what resources we need to be effective here, and how lacking that is right now. We talked about the beds that we have in our own community that aren't filled. We have I think we're 22 beds at one time that weren't available. If we had those 22 beds functioning, that would go a long ways to solving some of this challenges we have right now.
Thank you.
So can I just clarify? So we consulted with frontline workers, not people of lived experience themselves. Thank you.
And sorry, just to clarify, some of those frontline workers have lived experience.
Yeah, I understand that.
Councilor Blackburn.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I'd like to further clarify a few things. That I did not consult with senior management at the healthcare agencies. I did not consult with senior staff. My consultation was with neighborhood residents and users directly. And I think that is a really important distinction to make. We're talking about people that are making choices. They're adults making choices, and they do understand, respect social norms. And by not clarifying what the social norms are, we leave at least for many, the implied sense or the implied permission that open drug use is fine everywhere. And I don't believe that's what they believe. They, over and over again, I heard that when we see children, we immediately put our drugs away. That when we are around kids, or we know even at Dance Fusion, when we know there's a class coming, then we rally people to get out of the area. The problem isn't most of the drug users. Like with most, establishing social norms, it's the outliers. It's the few people that aren't in a position to respect those norms or don't know those norms for whatever reason. And I think doing a bylaw like this will help create clarity for everybody, and in fact will empower the community if done right. And I think that's an important thing. This could be done wrong, and I think much of the opposition from the social sector is based on assumptions that this is being used punitive to punish, and we heard this directly. This is about criminalizing poverty. This is about a response to just drug use. When the reality is it's so much more nuanced than that. We recognize all of the factors at play. We have to take a broader view than just one community. We have to consider the values of the whole community, and creating that clarity, which will then in turn, if done well, create more social harmony, benefits everybody. It benefits the community when people aren't angry and aren't reacting because of the behavior of a few bad actors. And I think this is an important step. It's definitely not going to get us all the way there. I think even beyond the bylaw that we've established, we may want to look further at, but I do agree, and this is based directly on experience of the last couple of weeks, the direct engagement with people in the community, the users in the community, and asking them what they think, what are the solutions that they would come up with, or just even asking what they feel about the solutions we provide. And then, of course, doing exactly the same thing for the neighbors in the community most affected. I think that begins the dialogue. And I think dialogue is so key. One of the most positive responses I got from many of the users in the community was just the fact that I showed up, and other counselors did the same. Just the fact that we showed up and listened was a huge step in healing. And it starts the ball rolling of further dialogue and further conversation, which then hopefully begins the process of ultimately moving beyond these addictions. Because I think in the end, this is what we're seeking. We're looking towards a society, a community that has less addiction, that has less of the negative outcomes that come from addiction. So this is a step, and I think we have to do it well. I acknowledge that. But I think without it, we lose a lot of the clarity that's missing. That's it. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, councillors. I want to just make a comment about the fact that language is important when we're having this discussion. And so I just want to clarify that the use of the term supervised consumption site is, again, just to talk about what the Karen Lehman said there, is a federally mandated program, which we do not have in BC. So we need to not use the word consumption site, because we don't have them here. We have other kinds of sites here in Nelson, but we do not have consumption sites. And so the language around all of this is very nuanced. And it's just like people, when they hear also safe consumption site, and the federal language is actually supervised consumption site, because then I hear all the time, oh, and they're giving away free drugs when you go to wherever. We don't give away any free drugs. If you're using drugs, you're using the drugs that come from the street that are toxic and deadly. We do not have any program where you go into an OPS and get clean drugs. So language is really important. So we have here in Nelson OPS sites. We have overdose prevention sites. We have two of them, one at the hub, one at Anchors. They are currently for injection use only. No, we do not have an inhalation OPS, overdose prevention site here in Nelson. And overdose prevention sites are an exemption to the federal law because the provincial government in 2016 made a ministerial order, number 488, that we've talked about many times, declaring a toxic drug emergency. And it has been in place for 7 years, and it will continue to probably be in place for at least another 7 years, or longer, would be a guess. So language, I get a bit stymied on the language, because it's really important that when we're talking, and we're talking to people that are not as knowledgeable on this subject, that we use the correct language and not mislead anybody. So it's just, for me, that language is a really significant issue. I think that what I've heard around the table from those that are in favor of this bylaw and those that are not in favor of this bylaw is that we're still trying to find balance, and we're still trying to find clarity. And I think we all understand that there is a social contract that we all have to live by, because nobody wants to live in anarchy. I hear that consultation is ongoing. Consultation is not going to stop whether we pass or we do not pass this bylaw, because this is not a one-stop solution. As far as I can see, I don't know what the solution is to this problem. I don't think the three experts that sat at the end of the table here at 5 o'clock know what the solution is to this problem. For sure, I would agree with the city manager, is that health needs to develop a plan. And that plan needs to not just have harm reduction, which is the only tool in the toolbox currently. It needs to include recovery. And it needs to include recovery that is delivered in a rural setting, not Vancouver, not a rehab facility on Vancouver Island. It has to have recovery that is here for our people, our friends, our relatives. And even more importantly, it needs to also, after recovery, deliver reintegration. You only have to read the literature to understand the importance of addicts not only going through recovery, but to help them reintegrate. These people, in many cases, will have traumatic brain injuries. These are people that would be similar to those of us who know somebody that's had a stroke or a significant head injury from a car accident. These people need significant help, and they need it in many cases for the rest of their lives. And the other thing, and the buck stops somewhere, and this is one that's going to take a lot of money, is that there has to be human and financial resources that need to be put in place. I talked about this 2 weeks ago, that this idea that you're going to write a grant and you're going to get some money and you're going to get to hire somebody for 6 months is bullshit. I'll just say it again. It was bullshit 2 weeks ago, still bullshit today. So those are my thoughts. I think that we need to make a decision. We'll have a vote. We'll see where this goes. But the work has not ended based on whatever decision we make here tonight. So this motion has been moved and it has been seconded. All those in favor, please indicate. And those opposed? And do you wish to be recorded as opposed?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and Councillor Page? No. So that passes. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for everybody in the audience. I'm sure some of you are here probably just for this. We have a little bit of business to do. We're going to go back to where we kind of left off, and we're going to go back to pre-dinner. And I'm just going to quickly ask, did councillors have any reports that they felt they needed to give this evening? Or it's only been 2 weeks since we were last together, and we had a lovely long weekend with maybe some Caslow Jazz Festival or whatever in between. Councillor Payne.
I don't have a report. I have a public service announcement because I have a prop. So when you're creating your grab-and-go bag, don't forget to get money in small
Bills, yeah.
because there's no guarantee that ATM machines will be working. So fill up your tanks, 5, 10s, loonies, toonies, $100 per person, just so if and when we need to go, you're ready. Public service announcement done. Because I just got mine again. I get mine and I stuff it in my grab and go bag, and then I need $5 here and I need $5 there, and then I look and it's gone. So I'm refilled.
And $10 to pay the mayor for.
And $10 to pay the mayor for my
Breakfast the other day.
breakfast, my pancake breakfast.
And on public service announcements, does anybody else have anything to say? Anybody else got a report? I just want to remind everybody that today we did move into stage 2 water restrictions. And just a reminder that that means that even addresses can only water on Wednesdays, odds on Thursdays, unless, you're using your hand wand with the shut-off thingamabobby on the end of it. No washing your driveway. So please check out, I think it's nelson.ca/water, so that you can read the water restrictions as they play out. And also maybe keep an eye out for level 3, because who knows, we might get there at some point as well. But we have just started stage 2, and if we can all work on this together, it will be very helpful for our water conservation measures here in the city. And I think that's it. You got the grab and go, because that's the other thing is, it doesn't take too much to have to look out. I know that, can you see it, Councillor Payne, from your window?
It's still white smoke.
So Madam,
And that's good news that we hear from Chris Johnson, who used to be in fire and emergency services, that the smoke is still white, but we do have a number of fires in our area, and it is a reminder that you should have that grab and go bag ready.
so since we have our fire chief here, maybe we can get him to just give us a quick update on these fires. We're gonna get out,
Don't put you on the spot or anything.
get some information out there, but we just wanted to make sure the public,
Come up here and
Just
make
want-
sure you gotta push it on.
Yeah, we just want to make sure the public knows that, we're certainly monitoring these fires, and, we're actively participating in the updates, et cetera. So I know the chief was on the call this morning and has got some additional information on sort of the fires that are around us. And, you can certainly, we just need that one small bit of lightning storms, and it doesn't take very much to start these fires. And when we see that, we just need our community to be extra vigilant in when you're out there, wherever, whether it's a lawnmower or hopefully people aren't using chainsaws and those sorts of things, because it can start really quickly, and we don't need them in our community.
Thanks for that. Does that work? All right. We have daily coordination calls with the Southeast Fire Center and the Emergency Management Climate Readiness. They give us really good weather updates, trends looking forward, various models that often confuse things. But the fires that we have in the area are they're in good spots. They're high up on the ridge tops. They're not concerning to us right now. The fires that had potential were dealt with at a priority level. The 5 Mile fire was hit instantaneously. I think it went from out of control to out faster than I've ever seen any fire being actioned. We have another fire that is 7 kilometers west of Nelson in Sandy Creek. Again, that is being held, and it's high up on a ridge top. The largest fire that we have in the area is the fire up Sitcombe Creek right now. It's right on the ridge line between Sitcombe Creek and Kokanee Creek. It's probably the one that we can see. It's as of this morning, it was 50 hectares, so it went from a lightning strike to 50 hectares fairly quickly. The good thing is Sitcombe Creek, I've called it a lightning rod in the past, and it seems to have fires almost every year. There's not a lot left to burn up there. It's very rocky, probably why the lightning likes to hit it. And if the coordinates are accurate on the BC Wildfire website, it is going to run into a burn from a few years ago. There's already machine guard. They upgraded the roads during that time, so wildfire crews don't have to reopen roads. I think they'll get a handle on that fire relatively quickly. That's all the other fires down by Salmo that were started. A lot of those fires are in the middle of nowhere, and they're going out. They're not getting very big right now. We're in a good spot. It's a nice little reality check. So,
Good news.
Councilor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. So I've heard that June kind of sets the tone for the year, and we did have a fairly wet June.
yes,
So that's a positive for our region, is that correct?
absolutely. Yeah, June usually dictates the wildfire season. The southeast was probably the only area in the province that received an average amount of rain in June. Everybody else was below average. So extrapolating that, you would expect that we would have an average fire season. And so far, that's how I feel it's going to be. I mean, we're going to have spot fires and we're going to have fires. We've taken precautions and are continuing to take precautions to make our community more resilient against wildfire. And, you know, working with our stakeholders and our partners. I think, Nelson is a high value target for wildfire. I mean, we get a lot of good support from wildfire crews, and they're only getting better at what they do.
Thank you.
On the drought side, the provinces, I think it'll be either a level 4 or 5 drought across the whole province. We're in drought 4 conditions here, so it is dry here, and so I think we need to take that into account. It's extremely dry here, so we really need people both to conserve water and be really careful when they're out there, that they don't accidentally start an ignition. I think we've been super fortunate this year that we have not had thunder and lightning storms. That's the difference. This is the first thunder and lightning storms we have, and you see how many ignitions happen just through having 2 small storms. We haven't had those massive storms we had a couple of years ago, and earlier in the year where things were tender dry, and we're getting those massive lightning storms. So,
Any other further questions for the chief regarding the local fire activity? So just so you know, Chief, my next mayor's call is Thursday at 3:30. I will send Heather a little note so that she can perhaps join me if you're not available, but I will send it to you and John.
Excellent, thank you.
If you want to sit in. So, and any other counselors that want to sit in on one of those, so the 10th, I can send it out to everybody. It's not a shared website. I can't share for you to link in from wherever you are, so it's wherever I happen to turn on the meeting you have to come to, but I can make a point of being here in City Hall, and I'm scheduled for 3:30 on this coming Thursday, so we can always just do it in the admin room if somebody wants to drop by. Let me know if you're coming, otherwise I'll just have it in the office, but we can move it out to administration for the call to listen, and it's just the minister is on the line, and it's an interesting call in terms of he gets the updates for the local Southeast Fire Center. This one that I'm on is it's province wide, so it just depends who happens to dial in, and so it's very interesting because you get a perspective from mayors or regional district chairs from other areas. So you're talking about agricultural things and stuff that, where the city of Nelson, I don't have to worry about where I'm putting my cattle when I have to leave, but it's interesting to hear the questions that come that are being raised of concern in other areas. So, and right now they're doing them weekly because of the drought levels in the province. So,
It's kind of related to what you said. I know that we have our emergency management group, and I know that people in neighborhoods are like, oh, how would we get out of here, and those sorts of things. Is there a website or anything that we can direct folks to? And also like the go bag and those pieces. And then also I know that a lot of people are wondering about folks who maybe don't have access to leave town easily and simply, and what that would look like. Anyone from our unhoused population to like even international students comes to mind. I was curious if it's laid out anywhere or if there's kind of like tidbits somewhere to share.
Jeff has a plan. I will address just for you in terms of elderly and people, like if, just from my experience in terms of healthcare.
Yeah.
The healthcare for the people that are housed, but like seniors that that we know that get home care services,
Yep.
we have to, as a requirement of actually going to their home to actually deliver service, we have to have an evacuation plan for those. So it's a very integrated system. But
Okay.
in terms of an elderly senior that lives next door to you that you're not really sure about, that probably might be getting home support services, we would know that that person needs to have additional help, and all those things just generate right away. They can run a list and know who those people are. But Jeff is our lead for emergency services, so he can flesh out way more detail than I can there.
Yeah, so we have the City Nelson website, the emergency management portion of the City Nelson website has linked to a QR code for Buoyant Alert, which is the emergency notification system for the City of Nelson. So we get this call quite often, and the question usually is, when something bad happens, where do we go? And so that's a difficult question because it all depends on where that bad thing is happening. And so evacuations and where we evacuate people has to be very fluid. And so we have evacuation areas identified, but we don't publicize them. It's an internal plan until it needs to be distributed to the public because we don't want to cause mass confusion. And we want a single point of information. We want that people are going to be coming to the City of Nelson website and they're going to be listening to the Buoyant Alert notifications. That's why it's really important for people to subscribe to those services, because we don't need somebody on, Facebook or a social media platform saying, I heard you go here, and it puts somebody's life in danger. We need people to be going to one source of information, and that's the Nelson Emergency Management website.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So then we have the question of digital literacy. How many people don't have access to a website or social media, or don't have a cell phone for Buoyant Alert or something?
You can sign up for Buoyant Alert
By telephone?
through a bunch of different platforms.
Thank you.
So
Perfect. That's
I
what I was
oversimplified it by saying that
Yep.
there I
Yeah.
think it's 4 or 5 different messaging types.
Yep.
Doesn't include mail, unfortunately.
Nobody's going to wander through the streets
That's
with
right,
a bell or
that's right.
anything? Okay.
So, and part of our messaging also is that emergency management is a distributed response. So, and it takes a community to look after itself. So if you know that you have an elderly neighbor then maybe just touch bases with them. Do you have a plan? And it's really up to the whole Nelson Emergency Management. We fly the flag and we support, but it takes, in order for it to be successful, everybody has to play. And so I think that's where it's really important, is for local communities to look after their citizens, especially the ones that are challenged with technology or are elderly.
Could I add one more thing? Mm-hmm. I don't know where I was or how I found it, but Powell River actually does have, I printed this out because I didn't know what to do with it, or I would have sent it to somebody. But Powell River does have this little card. It's a back and forth sort of postcard thing, and it does show their evacuation routes. But I don't know, I know that you folks have been busy getting new staff on board and dealing with so many different things, but I don't know if that's a tool that...
Yes, so we do have an evacuation route planning.
But do you have something that everybody can get? Like, I know you say you can't direct people because we don't know where it's coming from, but they at least direct people to which streets to use going through towns, so you're not going to be running into
That's right.
emergency
So
services
yeah,
like
we have done the study and we've identified the routes. And we also have the University of Alberta is coming through with their doctors to do an infrastructure evacuation route planning study on Nelson.
Okay.
So I'm sure that documents like that will be
Will come
produced
out of
once
that.
we can compile all this information together.
Perfect.
We're just a little early yet.
Yep, that's what I want to check in on. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you for that.
Thank you, Chief.
So moving on to our last items here. Number 15, information items, correspondence, minutes of committees and commission meetings. So we have items from finance, purchasing and development services. If somebody wants to move those for receipt for information. Perfect, thank you, Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. Councillor Payne, I'm thinking that you have a question.
I wasn't fast enough.
Sorry, you can pull out whatever you want. I mean,
Yeah.
it's moved and seconded. We haven't done
So,
anything.
thank you so much for the correspondence. It's been great to get it in a timely fashion in a number of different modalities. I really appreciate that. Is this the time when we would bring something forward out of that? And the one that I'm referring to is the beach volleyball thing? Or how would will someone respond to them of the channels to take to move that forward? Okay, that's all it sounded like a cool idea. I talked to them and I'm like, yeah. So I just wasn't sure when we see that stuff, so. And will we find out how that's moving forward, or how does that go around next? When we see those things?
Through the chair, yeah, the direction provided was for them to get in touch with, I think Hoops was one of the groups. I'm sort of looking at Sebastian there. Hoops, one of the groups that was really successful in pursuing this. So as they sort of continue to mature their idea, then we will hear more, and definitely that's something we can keep you updated on.
Right. Sounded like just another service in that whole wonderful melange that's down at Lakeside right now. So, growing sport. Let's keep people healthy. I'm in.
So, and just a reminder, Councillor said there is a correspondence binder that's in the office there to take a look at. I just saw that the beach volleyball question about 10 minutes before we started the meeting tonight. So, anyhow, so there you go. This would be the place to bring it up. If you're reading the correspondence beforehand and you think you want to bring that piece of correspondence forward, it would be good to flag that either with myself or with the corporate officer, so that if we need more information or can tell you what action was taken when it came in, then we would have that ready, so that when you pull it out, then we. Because otherwise, you pull it out and then sometimes we're sending it back again.
Yeah, no,
So-
that's what I mean. That's why I asked
it's,
now, to find out what is the procedure.
Well, there isn't, like, we
It's
don't
not
have anything cast in stone for a
It's
procedure.
not anything critical, it's
Yeah.
not, but, you know,
I
when
think just
that comes up.
I would just say to everybody, ask some questions, because it's really, we haven't had this, we don't have the system perfected yet. It's not in some kind of policy or bylaw or, so I think we just have to work with it a little bit. Yeah, and see how it goes. So do take that opportunity to read that binder when you come into the office for other things. So anything in financing, purchasing, or the development services report that anybody wanted to discuss? Okay, seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that carries. I don't believe there's any notice of motions. There was no late items brought forward at the beginning of the meeting. And I'd like a resolution to move back into in camera, please. Moved by Page, seconded by Tate. All those in favor? Thank you.